So, welcome to the Estonian Open Air Museum Setu farm. I will give a few brief words in Estonian. Tere tulemast siis meie natukene teistsugusele spetsialistile seminarile. Et tänane seminar toimub siis rahvusvahelise hübriidkonverentsi raames Pärandkodud rohepöörde tuules. Ja ikka mõõtuta, lähengi vaikselt üle inglise keelele. Welcome to the Estonian Open Air Museum Setu farm. We are very glad to have you here as part of this conference concerning heritage homes in the green transition. My name is Alois. I will be moderating today. We have 3 presentations, each one approximately an hour long. We shall see. We have a presentation from Eran, from Petra, and the final presentation will be given by myself. I would also like to welcome our online viewers, both local and international. Please note that we will be moderating also the YouTube chat, so if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask the presenters, we can forward it to them and you can get your answers. But I believe that without further ado, let's get started. Our first presenter is Eran Mordohovitch, an architect working in the Israeli Antiquities Authority, teaching architectural conservation at the Technion, which is the Israel Technology Institute, and is currently the head of ICOMOS Israel. So without further ado, Eran, please.
Thank you. So tell me if you hear me, if I stand in the way. The lights. Yes. So thank you. So I was given 1 hour to speak. It's a lot. I'm not sure I can speak 1 hour in a row, but so what I will do, I will present the presentation, but please disturb me while talking, ask questions, so the hour will pass very quickly, and I like to have a dialogue, so we can have you can interrupt me and ask questions. I hope I can answer them. I have to say I'm not an expert on climate. I'm an architect. And I actually, during my work, I'm working on archaeological sites and archaeological heritage management in the north of Israel. And so normally it's not the consideration of climatic issues, but within my position, I'm also kind of representing this governmental organization. In the old city of Akko, we have a conservation committee because it's a World Heritage City. So part of the management plan of the city was to establish this committee, and I'm representing the interest of the archaeology, but also dealing with heritage management in this city, which is very interesting, very difficult, very challenging. And by that, the issue of let's say, energy installations in a heritage city like Akko came up already to our committee, and then it started to kind of get in my mind that we really need to address this issue before it becomes a concrete problem, because the dynamics in Israel in general, and particularly in Akko, is that people are doing what they think they need or want or should do. They don't wait for the authorities to authorize or to give them permits. Sometimes they do, but mostly they just do. And then I think in this kind of environment, we have to be we have to prepare, and we have to think what would be possible within this kind of question about installing, in this case, photovoltaic. You called it solar cells. But the title of the lecture is Energy Sufficiency. So I learned something. It will come. So. Or I take it backwards? It should work. Yeah, it's the opposite. The backwards is forward. It's because I come from the Middle East, probably. So I will speak a little bit about our climate. What I will do, I took Akko as one example and Tel Aviv. So both of cities are on the coastline of the Mediterranean, and they are in many ways two extremes in terms of culture of building, in terms of social, demographic, economical structure. And so the difference is very big, but the climate is common. And we're talking about two completely different kind of architecture. One is vernacular and the other one is modernist, both World Heritage cities. So I thought this comparison might be interesting. So I will speak also about a bit about Mediterranean vernacular architecture, about a little bit to present the old city of Akko, and also its climatic characteristics, the white city, its values, and again talking a little bit about the climatic history of this kind of architecture. Then discuss a little bit about Tel Aviv, about Akko, about the challenges we have there, mostly about anticipation for photovoltaic panels, and then a little bit thinking about the future. I've learned a lot during the 2 days, so I a little bit kind of try to adjust my speak to what we have spoken, but and I also have some points for discussion in the end, so I hope we can have some kind of insights from you about the questions I have. In this audience, that we don't need to speak too much about the conflict and between preserving heritage and promoting sustainability. It's a kind of built-in conflict in many ways, but we understand it also may be possible. And maybe I think this conference is part of this, how to put those two together. It's part of the UN SDG. Affordable and clean energy, sustainable cities and communities, and climate action. So these kind of three goals are in the core of this discussion. A little bit about the climate that we are talking about. So we have been here in the northern area, and I'm talking about completely different climate. We are a little bit, or we are, Israel is there, the Mediterranean is around the 30 latitude and a little bit above until the 33 latitude. So we are bordering the desert climate already. So Israel is a very small country, but it has quite varied climatic zones, from desert to semi-alpine in the north, coastal and subtropical. But I'm going to talk about, so our climate is hot, dry summers, very long summers, and they are getting longer and longer, and mild, wet winters. So wet is almost a wishful thinking, because they're getting drier and drier also. We have less rain in the winter, and we sometimes have this strong rains in the mid seasons. But this is the basic weather we are dealing with. So hot, dry summers, and they are also on the coast very humid. There is huge humidity coming from the Mediterranean, and that will affect, and I will show why it affects our discussion. So this is the thermal discomfort or heat load, which is actually taking in consideration the temperatures. I have something here which I might use. Yeah, so the temperatures and also the humidity, and this kind of combination is how comfortable you feel. I think we also talked about it, so about how comfortable we feel. And in the range we are talking in the summers in Israel, we are already around the 32, 33, 30 degrees, sorry. And on the coastline, we are in humidity, which is something around here. So you can see the colors are getting kind of almost between orange to red, which means not an easy feeling. And this is one of the things vernacular architecture had to mitigate or mitigated in the past, but also what do we do with that today and how modernist architecture tried to mitigate it. And this is getting worse and worse. Those are temperatures in, along the coast, so you can see, I think this is summer, this is winter average, and this is summer average. But for me, those numbers look a little bit low. I think they are much higher. For sure, with humidity, yes. So this is the world. Other talking about what will happen in the next 80 years or 70 years. So we are today somewhere here, and we are going to get, in the best scenario, to 2 degrees warmer Israel, and in the worst scenarios, we're going to get to 4 degrees more than today, which means everything we feel hard today, it will be much harder and maybe sometimes unbearable. I copied it from the, just a moment. Yeah, it's from the Haaretz newspaper, just when I prepared the lecture. This says that it was things we thought we know, but we actually don't know. It says that the number of consecutive days in which coastal temperature were 32 degrees and above, look what happened here from 1996 when we had, that's in Israel, 3 days, and today we are, this year we had 88. 88, it means the whole summer, the three months in a row, and that means also that the temperatures do not go down in the evening, in the nights. So actually it's called heat wave, continuous heat wave in a way, and this is you can see the prediction and the situation today. So the main challenges actually that we deal in Israel or in our region are about cooling and ventilation. That also was very interesting to learn about it concerning your region. So it's about ventilation, cooling, and a little bit about heating. Because, as I said, winters are becoming shorter and milder. So this is actually the picture that we should try to mitigate. I accept your remark that it's not about cooling or heating. It's more about, you said, comfort. A little bit about Mediterranean vernacular cities. So that's referring to Akko, but to many cities around the Mediterranean, mostly in the southern part, eastern part of the Mediterranean, but it also refers to cities in Europe in the southern part. We have, it starts with compact urban layout, and those things have influence on the climate within those cities and within the houses. So first, urban structure, narrow streets and alleys, irregular patterns, so you don't have very big sun radiation in big streets or so, courtyards and patios, terrace building and streets, and structure adapted to social and religious traditions. So this is the idea that there is a certain level of moving from the public into the private. It goes well with the architecture and with the climate, but it also influences the urban layout. And regarding climate and architecture, so we have the thick walls. This is also part of the way people used to build before they have other technologies. The flat or sloped roofs, but sloped roofs are more scarce. And whitewashed walls, they're not always white really, but light colored. Small windows and shading, that's obvious. The use of local materials, which are kind of fitting to the climate, orientation of facades, and ventilation, which we talked about it. So there are many more other things, but it's not a lecture about vernacular Mediterranean cities. But those things, I think, they are part of the way we should look also on the climate issue. So first I start with Akko. Akko is on the northern part of the country, on the coast. It's been a human settlement for more than 6,000 years, from many periods. I'm not going to speak all about that, but this picture is from the Crusader period, the siege of Akko, which at that time Akko became the main city of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, of the Crusaders, and it became a very big city. 40,000 people used to live there. It was main port, and it is also was very important for the European as a connection with Europe. So the foundations of the city that we know today, the old city, is actually from this period. Later on, it was conquered by the Mamluks, by the Muslims, and was kind of neglected and left for ruins for 300 years. And then in the middle of the 18th century, one of the local rulers rebuilt Akko because he understood the economical potential of this city as a port city, because it was the only natural port along the eastern coast of this country. And in 1799, Mr. Napoleon Bonaparte arrived on the gates of Akko after during his Middle East trip, and conquering trip, and he tried to conquer Akko, and he didn't succeed. And it's something amazing that the people of Akko, the local people of today, they're still very proud on that fact that they were able to. It was a help of the British, but they take the credit that they could push Napoleon away. And Akko is a city with walls around it, and with a port. And the story of Napoleon is very interesting. That's how the city looks. It's sitting on a peninsula. It's surrounded by walls, and it has all kind of features which I don't have the time to tell. But it's really an amazing, interesting, and complex place. I will tell a little bit more about the population. But first, I will say that it was nominated and declared as World Heritage City in 2001, the second Israeli site after we have ratified the World Heritage Convention. And the criteria were that it's a medieval Crusader buildings which are underneath an Ottoman 18th century, 19th century city. So these double layers are very important. Then the story of the Crusader is, of course, because of its importance. And thirdly, that it is still presenting typical urban components of Ottoman 18th and 19th century city, with citadel, mosque, khans, etc., but also housing, which they didn't mention it, but actually that's maybe the most important part, is the population which lives there today. And we try to facilitate World Heritage together with a living city, which is also a tourist destination with all. So some pictures of the city as it is today, and some pictures as it was a few decades ago. One of this is the architecture of Caravanserai Hans. This place is now becoming a hotel, so it doesn't look like that anymore. Typical house with windows to the sea, ventilation, as we spoke. Those windows which are on top usually, and they help ventilation. You can see them here. This is kind of a lot of mosques, and also dealing with the humidity and salts from the sea. The stone of the city is, we talked about it at lunch break, is a conglomerate. It's actually a sandstone mixed with all kind of shells and things, and it's a very porous stone, so it takes humidity in with salts, and if it's not being, if you don't let it evaporate, then the stones break from the crystals, and therefore we have this issue of breathing of the plasters and of the stones, and this is one of the things we have to explain to the local people today. They are not Mason people, so they don't understand this logic, and they use cement, etc. So a lot of things. What is interesting to see is the structure of the streets, which is the main streets are going north-south, and this north-south direction in our region is a very important feature in cooling down those main streets, because the sun mostly is hitting from the east and then from the west. At noon it's above, but it's easier to shade, and therefore this orientation is very important, and repeating also afterwards. Then we have kind of a typical neighborhood of living neighborhood, and you can see how many patios and inner squares there are, or there were. This is a British map from 1929, which was adopted. What is also interesting to see that in a map of Sanudo, which is the first map we have from Akko, St. John the Acre, whatever name you want to call it, we can see that this structure of street is still there in the medieval time. So I think somebody mentioned yesterday that cities that can keep their structure as it was, it's already one of its attributes or values that, so Akko kept it, and we can see that it was also important in those days. This is a photo from the RAF from 1944, which I personally like very much because it really shows the structure of the city and the fortifications from Napoleon, before Napoleon and after. And the city has changed a lot, but it has still the features, as I said, markets, walls, khans, etc. There are around 5,000 residents in the old city, and 95 of them are Arab Muslims. It's very important to say. It's because it also says a lot about the socio-economical status and state of those citizens and their ability to handle those World Heritage demands and understanding those values and also investing in it. It's very low in social economical grade or scale in Israel, so it's 3 out of 10. And I mentioned the electricity because we talk about electricity and energy, and then it's all from the national grid, and a lot of illegal and improvisations, connections, and things which are done by the people themselves without. So the reality is I will go back to it afterwards, about the conflict between the residents and the government and the municipality, which is part of the discussion also for me. This is typical housing or vernacular architecture that we have as living units with the interior square or a court or a space. We have normally a ground floor which is very high and vaulted with vaults, and over there it used to be in the past a courtyard, and then they closed it, and then they put merchandise or animals, things like that, on the lower floor, and the families lived in the upper floor, and sometimes there is a third floor. So what can we say about climate changes or climate challenges? So first we have a division of high ceiling. So one of the things was that high ceilings let the heat accumulate in the upper part and be ventilated out. But what happened that since 1948 there were a lot of refugees, Arab refugees, moving to Akko, and there started to be a huge housing problem. And then people, what they did is they took So instead of the air going up, they divided this one big high unit into 2 units, and then there is a floor in between, and there is windows up and window down, and the big window which used to be there, beautiful window, this one is completely gone and blocked. So the whole circulation of the air is changing within this, and we have this phenomena a lot in Akko. So we have the air condition condenser on the facade. I have to say something. I mean, air condition is a must in a way. It's very difficult without. And I think we need to find ways how to air condition or cool the houses. It was mentioned today with green energy or with energy which is not fossil. But it will be very difficult in Israel, and I don't know, maybe you as a tourist, you went to those areas or work. It's very difficult in the 21st century to live without it. It's a fact. I think it's very difficult. Yes?
Coming from the subtropics, I know what you mean, but the problem is it heats as well. It's heating the public realm.
Yeah.
So the other thing we have to find is a way that we're, not just in terms of the energy we're using, but also the heating from these systems of tight urban environments. It's difficult.
Yeah. So we have also the air condition condenser, which are disturbing. We have inner court, which were blocked with all kind of, again, agglomerating of and extending small apartments. It's normally very small apartments, and then the roofs are being used for many things, garbage, boilers, condensers, whatever. We'll speak about it later. And also the question of the plaster. In the past, Akko used to be a plastered city, rendered with lime plaster, something like that, let's say. But today what happens is that we have almost none of the houses in Akko are plastered. This is an addition we let them do, but we force them to do a plaster because it's made out of light materials. So we don't want to see those materials, and we're allowed to do it because of the weight. But the buildings are not plastered because plaster needs maintenance, and maintenance is not something that is done, at least in our region. So it's difficult. The physical conditions with the salt and with the lime, and which is not suitable always, it's very difficult to find good render that will. So if they render, they put cement inside, and we know what's the problem. Then it doesn't breathe, and so we prefer to have it like that the stone is breathing, than to have cement plaster. I jumped to Tel Aviv, again World Heritage City, but completely from a different period. It's a modernist city on the coast, Mediterranean coast. So it's a bit kind of 150 kilometers south of Akko. It started as a neighborhood outside of Jaffa. Jaffa was this city with a small port, but one of the main ports. And it was mainly an Arab city. And Tel Aviv started as a neighborhood. And then it developed so it started in 1909, so it is a bit more than 100 years old. But Jaffa is again 6,000. And then in the 30s, with very big immigration from Europe, of Jews from Europe, it grew and it became really the powerhouse of Palestine at that time. They say the first Jewish city, the first Hebrew city. And it actually, it's today a city of almost 500,000 people, but it's in the middle of a metropolis which is about 2.5 million people. So, but economically, culturally, that's the capital of Israel, and not Jerusalem, as many European countries think. This ugly building, or not so beautiful building, is where the Estonian embassy is located. Therefore, I put it in. And actually, from inside, you have a very nice view on the white city of Tel Aviv, on the World Heritage Site, on the sea. So I wanted to give the Estonian a little bit of information if they come to Tel Aviv. That's where your embassy is. You can see quite nice how Tel Aviv, the white city, which is a protected area, is being surrounded by towers. So in the beginning, when Jewish architects came to Palestine in the turn of the century, of the 20th century, they tried to look for, let's call it Jewish architecture which resembles the Jewishness, but also they tried to get also ideas about how to build in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, climate-wise. So they used all kind of features they took from local craftsmen and local architecture. Those upper buildings are not from Tel Aviv, but I brought them because of the architect, and this is the first building of the Technion where we are teaching Ruth and I. But it's now the National Science Museum. But the houses you see below are houses in Tel Aviv, which were built in the, let's say, early 20s or a little bit before, in a very eclectic style, when Jewish architects try to search their way in what is suitable for Mediterranean climate, but also for the new nation building itself. At that point, in the early 20s, Patrick Geddes come into the picture. Patrick Geddes, a Scottish, he was a botanist, biologist, but he had a lot of influence on urbanism. At that time, he came with ideas from the Garden City, and he has his own ideas. And Geddes was appointed by the British, no, it wasn't the British.
By the Jews, actually.
By the Jews. But he came to Palestine from the 20s, and he advised from Jerusalem, Haifa, but Tel Aviv invited him to do this plan, which actually, as I read, is the only really plan that Geddes, which was implemented in such a scale. So his plan is actually, until today, sort of the core of historic Tel Aviv. But Ruth is here, and she's much more expert on Geddes than me, if she would like to add. This is a Geddes plan that it started to develop. The ideas were very clear and of building blocks and green areas inside the block gardens and the direction of the street. But the municipality of Tel Aviv later, due to pressures to build and densify, have changed. But the basics are actually there, and Geddes has taken also the direction of the northwest winds, which are the typical cooler winds in the summer, as a kind of a direction for the street leading to the sea. And the plan was afterwards also taken by the Tel Aviv municipality and changed, but it kept its main things. And what is interesting also is to see the direction of the north-south street, which I mentioned talking about Akko. They did now research, I showed it to Uti, that the cooler streets are the red ones. To the north, the north-south streets are the cooler ones, which is very important. It's important streets, main arteries of the city, but they are cooler than the streets which are perpendicular to the sea. And that's quite logical, again, because of the direction of that's Tel Aviv in the 40s, with the gardens that I mentioned before, and this is Tel Aviv area, central area today, very dense. And a little bit about the World Heritage Site. So this is the red thing is the buffer zone of the White City. White City, again, 2003, one of the first Israeli sites. And the blue is the declared areas with this kind of enclave here. So we have about 4,000 buildings within this area in Tel Aviv of the international style. 1,000 of them are in the nominated zone, the blue one, and 100 of them are, or only 100 of them are listed with highest grade regarding conservation. Also in Tel Aviv, the criteria were referring to the climatic adaptation. So They said that influences were adapted to climatic conditions of the place, and also the architecture of the early 20s adapted to the requirement of particular geographic context. So that is one of the things which are, we can see that by the initial thought about low building height, ratio of the street and the building height, and sufficient place for between the buildings to let ventilation. We have also flat roofs and small openings, shading elements, lintels from the south to shade, and the breakout of the mass, which is also climatic, but it comes also from the ideology. Some of the buildings as they were in the 30s mostly and 40s. This is one of the Vogue covers with this iconic building, which is, so the whole architecture was very iconic and became also kind of hip, for sure for the Tel Avivian but Israelis, but also in the world. Tel Aviv, until the wars that we are having now, it's quite an interesting destination for clubbers, gays, and tourists at all. Architecture tourists also. There's some pictures of the buildings as they are today, some with additions. I will talk about the additions, but those are not with additions. And the White City was actually, a new style was created there for modernism, influenced by other modernists like Le Corbusier, like the Bauhaus school. You should know that most of people call Tel Aviv the Bauhaus city, but it was not built only, or mostly not by Bauhaus graduates. But that's a common mistake. It's already branding of the city, so it's hard to resist it. Also the principles of Gropius from the Bauhaus, Mendelssohn with the rounded balconies, and Le Corbusier with the ideas of the 5 principles of Le Corbusier. Some of them have also influence on the climatic things. But finally, architects, and the architects were Jewish who immigrated from Europe. They came with European education, they came to Palestine, and they have sort of took from all those influences, but also referred to the climatic. So you can see this building is kind of a eclectic modernism from all those influences. They also were busy with the ideas of Le Corbusier, with the radiation and with the sun, ventilation schemes, how a building should be ventilated and how the facade should be shaded, and a lot of ideas from Le Corbusier of the windows, the horizontal windows became into horizontal balconies in Palestine. But the problem was that they used new materials and not the old materials, and they covered them with plaster, but the walls were thin and the roof were thin, and the windows were glazed in a poorly way. So that what all those things, and they used the concrete a lot of times, also bricks, but bricks from the local ones, or lime bricks, which is silicate. It's a material which was used. But the thing that radiation was penetrating the buildings, and there was not enough thermal mass like in the traditional buildings. And that created quite difficult conditions. What happened also that the lots were, so the whole plan was densified, and the buildings became higher, and the wrong orientation of some of the blocks, of half of the blocks were not orientated to the wind, but on the opposite side. And Wittkower, I bring him again, another German Jew architect who came to Palestine in the 30s. What happened that until in the 20s and 30s, the buildings were, according to European conceptions of pointing to the wind direction and ventilating the houses for healthy rooms and healthy people. In Palestine, it didn't work. It worked a little bit, but it didn't work really hard because the radiation is the most important factor. And Wittkovel, he was an architect, but he gathered some scientists around him, and he did the research about it, and his conclusion was that you should build the buildings always the long facade facing north and south, because the sun is coming from the east, and that's a way you can avoid radiation better than any other direction. And it changed something, because in the late 40s, after the State of Israel was established, we got the brutalism also influence, and buildings started to be more orientated towards solar solutions or shading solutions with very deep balconies and a lot of shades, and they use this kind of local or modern version of the Arab or Mediterranean mashrabia, the thing which is kind of shading the windows and the roofs. And so there is this kind of concrete version of it, and you can see that the buildings really became with deep facade and with much higher thermal mass, which meant better conditions. We don't have air conditioning at that time in Israel, so we are still before the air conditioned area. In Tel Aviv, we have the layer 2 additions on the heritage buildings. That's a policy which was already in Tel Aviv before the World Heritage nomination, and it depends on which building and what its definition in the conservation plan. But Tel Aviv is very liberal with additions on modernistic building. You can see here some additions. Some of them are done, according to me, very nicely and kind of respecting very much the original modernist principles, and some are different, but and on the eclectic buildings they look really eclectic. So at least eclecticism is continuing. The idea is that if you have 3 levels, you can add another 2.5, and the reason for it is money. So if a contractor or a developer is building another 2 levels, he can renovate the lower floors, conserve them, and make them nice again, like making them again nice. And but it's a profit, so that's an important point. This is one typical cycle which a building like that went through from 1935 to later. You can see people used to close the balconies and start to have air conditions on the fronts and all kind of things on the roof. And then in this 2002, Baro and Gazit did another edition of two levels in 2.5 levels. And that's a sort of a practice. So if we speak about the 30s, 20s, and we speak today, in urban changes, they are very big, and traffic is so much more today. So the idea of people opening their windows and sitting in the balconies is not sustainable anymore for people in many ways. It's not that they don't use it, but the conditions are very different. Densification is, as I said, and global warming, temperature are higher, and those buildings are not fitted for this kind of temperatures. I mean, the original ones, also the thin walls and ceilings, I mentioned all those things. Today people want bigger apartments, and we're talking again about air conditioning from the 90s on. It became a standard, for sure, in Tel Aviv. Television I wrote because people don't sit in the balconies anymore, they watch television. And reinforcement of the buildings, we need it for security reasons, but also for seismic reasons. So this kind of additions also promote this kind of shelter rooms in each apartment, and also reinforce the building for seismic. We are in a seismic area in Israel, and and there is no law about green standardization, but I will speak about it in the short time I have. So if we understand that radiation or from the facades and windows and roof, we have like 75% of the exposure and the way energy gets away. So that's something to deal with. And then we have on the roof, we have those facilities for warming water, and now the question of photovoltaic panels. And also we know that air conditioning and a little bit of heating, but mostly air conditioning is 30% to 40% of the energy consumption for an average household. So the high cost for conservation. So conservation in Tel Aviv is very costly, and it's very difficult to impose also the energy efficiency regulations and so on that. And the thing that they say that when you have to put outside thermal insulation, then it will change the proportions of the buildings. And the proportions of the building is part of the value. It also, the change of materials, for example, of the windows and of the plaster, replacement of the windows, the frames, and it's also a matter for authenticity, losing it. And also those installations disfigure the roofs or the gardens or even the walls. So this is also a hinder. And the shading elements, modern ones, also are changing the values. Tel Aviv municipality did try to deal with this, they call it green conservation. They updated it last year with kind of advices for the people what to do. We have also the green renovation manual it's a governmental from the Ministry of Environmental Protection. And they mostly recommend to insulate better, have the walls lighter, insulate also to use the floors as thermal mass, re-establish the ventilation, the original ventilation elements, replacing the windows to more insulating systems. Normally the windows are wood, and it's difficult to put the double glazing if you don't use very specific systems. Introducing shaders, installing sun screening coating on some of the windows which are not on the front, on the street, and improving the AC installation efficiency. So always improving, so having a higher level of energy efficiency. We have a norm which is actually from 2023 is kind of became the standard for new buildings, but it's not implemented so much on heritage buildings and unless it's a voluntary thing. In Tel Aviv, they adopted already in 2013 the norm, but they don't apply it on heritage buildings, and that's because what I've shown before. We have the roofs of Tel Aviv, and the big thing that it's not a very big roof, 200 square meters for 6 to 8 or 10 apartments. And then you have the air conditions, which we want to put on the roof. We also want to put the sun boilers, which are compulsory and mandatory in Israel to put on the roofs. So each apartment needs, and then we want to put already also the photovoltaic things, and then we want to have also a green roof and to have some green in the city, and we also want to have a social place, a meeting place for the tenants. So everything has to be on those roofs, and this is impossible. This is not realistic, and therefore they have to be compromised. About the layer 2 thing, I think it can improve because it's insulating the old roofs by building on top of it. And then it's also improving the replacement of all systems within the older building. And then it's also you can create a more custom roofs for energy installations which are more effective. And also another aspect of sustainability is that you're adding new life to the city without demolishing building. But so it's maybe not a wonderful solution, but it's sort of can contribute also. This building looked like that, by the way, in the 40s. So it maybe can come back to its situation. It's my Photoshop, so it's quite. It's like that, and I did anyway. A little bit about Akko. So Akko is. I go back to Akko to vernacular and the question of photovoltaic. Some of the people who were in Visby know this basically. I've looked at the other roofs in Mediterranean World Heritage City, like in Morocco, Tunis. Something closer to us is Rhodos, which is a little bit more like Akko. And we can see already in the other examples much less intervention on the roofs, but here in Greece already sun boilers and satellite dishes, etc. Also in Valletta in Malta, you have also sun boilers and dishes, but I think the culture there is of using those rooftops more than in other places. This is Jerusalem, old city. What is typical to our roofs in our region is that it's part of the urban integrity. It's a fifth, so it's a historical profile of the city. It's a fifth facade. It's visible from many places. It is also a tradition of using the roofs. Some cultural aspects, in some places it's not so much, as I also know. It has a three-dimensional complexity, which is part of the values, and those cities are living cities, so it means we have to see how people live in them in good conditions and in an affordable way. So solar energy is a very important energy. I don't have to explain it here, so it's going to be more and more important in our energy production. Maybe this is a trend. I don't know if it will continue, but there are advantages. As they say, sunlight is abundant. It will be 25% of the market. They fit public and private, small and big, which is quite attractive. And they can also generate income, which is important also for a place for Akko. It's also much cheaper to installate it today. So the prices go down and you can decrease the surface. So solar is the Superman of the green energy. I know it's not, but let's assume that it's all clean product and after 20 years it's being dismantled and used as tents or I don't know what. So I think that we've spoken with somebody about it. I think we have to mitigate this issue. We cannot just say no to solar panels in the old city of Akko, because it doesn't work like that over there. People, as I said, tend to do things if they think it's good for them and worth for them and affordable, and therefore they will do it. So if we had roofs like that in the 1918, very kind of with nothing on, it starts to change in the 50s, and then came the television antenna, if you remember them, and the sun boilers. In the 60s also became, as I said, from the 70s, because of the oil crisis of 1974, if you remember the oil embargo, it was a catalyst for those sun boilers to be obligatory in Israel. So every house has to have a sun boiler unless it's higher than 6 floors or something like that. But it saves a lot of electricity, and so it became part of the roofscape of many Israeli cities. But it's efficient. And the roofs of Akko are full of those sun boilers, and as you can see, all the goodies are on the roofs. It's a place where, so we have a lot of concerns with putting sun panels on the roofs, as you agree with me. There are many reasons why not to put them. I think because of heritage only, but there are many other reasons, but maintenance is very low, so I think you mentioned those reasons why not. We have also the issue of big roofs, so if we let the small roofs, then the big roofs will come, the public, and then it will be a huge disaster. So with those reasons, we have concerns. That I brought the Czech is not here anymore. It's a kind of a manual they have from the National Heritage Institute in Czech Republic, which try to mitigate this idea of where is possible to put sun panels. So it was kind of illustrative, but I'm not sure it works for us. I did try to take a typical roofscape of Akko with all the mess and think what happens if we use panels which are kind of flat, not the one with the metal structure, but more advanced ones, and we put them on the roofs, what influence it will have. And maybe the colors can be different, because today you can have them in different colors. But we have a lot of technical issues, like the original roofs were from wood, and we tried to implement more wooden roofs instead of concrete, because it's not good. But we have the small roofs, because of the size of the units, the weight. The traditional roof are made from wood normally, very simple, and all the structures on top of the roof, it might be a problem. And we have also the shading effect of the uneven building, so a lot of roofs are covered with shade, so it's not efficient for them. People then will have difficulty to access the roof for installation, but also for maintenance, which is a problem. And then we have a small parapet on the roofs, and then it will require flat panels, and then flat panels means less efficiency. So we have also regulatory issues. As I said, enforcement is very weak in the city. So even if we get to agreement about a good solution of visual solution, probably it will not be implemented. And there is no obligation to do that. And there is also a very complex structure of units, few units, the roof belongs to them. But so how do you manage that? It will make a lot of fights. And also most of the houses are belonging to housing associations, government. It belongs to the government, and the government is only interested in selling them and not investing in them. So for sure they will not go for sun panels. There are advantages because now we can have smaller ones, we can have integrated elements, maybe in, let's say, shades on the roofs. We can make them maybe adaptive more to the color. And if everybody will have it, then we'll have much less wires and poles. And so it has also this kind of effect. And we have also the microgrid element. I will speak about it. So normally it would be something like that. And in roofs like that, you could put panels like that. This is very bad, so we don't want to have that. But in the name of equality, why those buildings won't have it? So that's a problem. And we know that if we ask to do like that, people will do the cheapest one and the easiest one and maybe the more efficient ones, which is bad. And also they will put it everywhere to get more electricity. So maybe shades like that we permit to do with solar elements can work. So all those questions bring me to the conclusion about Akko, and what I say that I think it needs to have sort of a investigation. I don't think we can say, I think we have to be prepared for this kind of change, but it has to be investigated and maybe find recommendations, but we should do it now. There are new systems like solar cooling systems, which are very complicated and they need big areas. So you can see this kind of solutions. They are implemented a lot in Europe, by the way, but they need big areas, so they're not suitable for housing units. But we have this kind of local, small and cheap solution, which is air conditioned with sun panels. So they get their electricity in the day from the sun panel, and in the evening they are. So this is not the ones I think are fit to Akko, but they are developed, and in India you have many of them. And so it's a kind of quite minimal solution to have. And then in the evening you plug it to the AC. So it's combined, it's a hybrid. But the problem that we have normally in household, we have more than one unit, so we will need few of them on the roof. So, but maybe it's a sort of solution how to get the energy for the air conditioning. What are the alternatives is to have what I call solar energy rights. So it means that in cities like Akko, World Heritage City, or cities that we cannot have them for many reasons, maybe we can produce electricity in central place, the city or the government, and have those people who live in Akko, people who are not in economical good situation, the ability to have those sun rights instead of installing those panels for each family. And then the creation of microgrid is also very important in our. I brought this for the main conclusion is from the Israeli Council for Green Building. So they write on their webpage the reasons why should I do a green building, why it is worse for me. So the question is, what does it good for me, not for the big global warming, and how much it saves on expenses. And I think that's maybe part of the solutions. So those are my conclusions. I don't have time. But that's for you, Estonian. And I have a few points for discussion. Maybe we can do it after together. Is the top-down initiatives or the bottom-up processes? What are the, from the experience of Akko, I think it's quite interesting, because when people have motivation to do it economically, maybe that's the way to go forward. And then how flexible are the authorities? How we are flexible to have those kind of changes and modifications. And the last thing is about those energy banks. So how can we can create those communal solar or renewable energy bank, and in that way sort of have compensation for people who cannot have it, but encourage them to use green energy and to have the economical beneficial from that. So this is it. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm over the time.
Thank you, Eran. Do we have any questions, thoughts, feelings? Well, I did notice that there was a sort of trend that I deal with completely different buildings, like it's rural detached buildings in like a mild northern climate, but I did notice that the trend of somewhat ignoring passive, tried and true, like solutions that provide like thermal comfort, like in the case of Estonia, it's like very like passive measures that provide like air tightness of a building, very simple like wallpaper on the interior side that people remove due to like aesthetic preferences that then reduce the air tightness of the entire structure. It's very like I felt a very similar situation, for example, like ignoring the rendering on like on historic building that will like increase the amount of heat that the walls will absorb. So I do see an interesting like international trend in a way that I don't know is maybe tied to lack of maintenance. Is it perhaps tied to this sort of a more consumerist mindset that we can replace things. We don't need to deal with maintenance as much. I don't know.
Maintenance is a huge factor in the fact in Akko for sure when people don't have money and the state doesn't give them incentives or reduction or a kind of support. So maintenance, it's also a matter of culture. We have other problems. The building is, and it's not there, so they say it doesn't belong to us anyway. So it's ownership also in this case. But maintenance is a huge problem. If maintenance was something more predictable and common, then I think many of the things of the roofs that you have seen would have looked different, and we could also the facades and the window and the blinds, and they put the blinds but never paint them. So finally they fall apart with the salt and with the sun. So,
but it's still funny that even in the earlier days, people were still conscious of like resource efficiency. You didn't want to waste anything.
Yes.
And it's still the same situation somewhat, but we're not maintaining what we already have. We're letting it decay. We're not understanding like the passive function of like simple things, blinds, verandas, for example, rendering. So I do think it's sort of, it's a very interesting correlation, I believe. And yeah, of course.
Well, I'm sort of talking about someone else's work. I mentioned this yesterday, that there's a wonderful young architect, Narika, what is Larika's last name? She comes from Jodhpur in India. She's working doing her PhD in Edinburgh at the moment. And she was talking about the maintenance of Jodhpur, which they do collectively every year. It's a blue wash, which they say is really good for health as well. So, and the whole community works on that. And they say that is what bonds their community, which is, perhaps it's finding ways that it becomes a positive. Actually, as a bit of Estonian context, we actually have a calendar day when we do these sort of, well, in Estonian climate it's very different, for example, but we do have a specific day when we install, for example, winter frames into our windows, and when we retight like the lateral grooves in our like log walls, and it's called Miklipäev, and that is the main point in the calendar when you're supposed to do these sort of small regular improvements to your boundary surfaces and structures in preparation for the colder months to raise the energy performance of the building, basically. So it doesn't have a very communal aspect to it, and I'm afraid the day has lost some of its prevalence. So, but in terms of like our Build Us project, we also use it a bit in a communication that it's very historic, it's part of our culture, and it's already helping us achieve like climate goals. So it can be, it definitely, we believe has potential to be a social affair. Why not? But as we're a bit behind schedule, we would like to give Eran something as a token of our appreciation. So once again, thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for all the information and all for the lectures and the discussions that we had here. It's kind of encouraging and not discouraging us, because we are, it's something we should really work on it, and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a next presenter now. Our next presenter is Petra Eriksson, a lecturer at the Uppsala University Campus Gotland. And I would also like to point out that cooperation between the Estonian Open Air Museum Center of Rural Architecture and Uppsala University Campus Gotland goes back to 2010. We have jointly participated in 2 Interreg projects, as well as a continuing Nord Plus project, all related to both the conservation of cultural heritage and energy efficiency. And Viljar will also bring you the microphone, so we can hear you. can manage. Okay. Yeah, that would be fine.
Like that.
Okay, but without further ado, please.
Thank you very much. And if you want to just stand up a little bit, if you want to do that, while I present myself, you can do that. Yes, you can stand up while I present myself. Hello, I'm Petra Eriksson. I met some of you during these days, and I would like to just say thank you for inviting me here. Yes, I work as a researcher and teacher in the field of conservation at Uppsala University. And my background is mainly in energy, in the field of research. It's about energy efficiency in historic buildings. I did my PhD quite recently, actually, and that was about energy efficiency and energy performance from a building stock perspective. Because we thought that we need to know something about not just the singular building, but what happens if we are doing something or if we do nothing in bigger parts of the building stock. So that was what I dealt with in my PhD, in my dissertation. But then, of course, you can't just work on the building stock level. So today, I would like to present something about a research project that we run still. Actually, it will end now in the end of this year, about how house owners think about energy efficiency. So that will be the topic for this presentation. And the title is aligning, I think I will stand here actually, is that okay? Yeah. Aligning homeowners' attitudes towards cultural values and energy efficiency with societal demands. Well, maybe that will be more or less the whole project, but I will tell you a little bit about it here today. So we want to understand change also in historic building. Why are people making changes? What are they how do they base their decisions? And this project is part of the research program Spara and Bevara, Save and Preserve, that is famous in Sweden and that also is running in the last year, this year. And that was a special program for actually energy efficiency in historic buildings. And this project is carried out together with Uppsala University and colleagues at the University College London. And our research colleagues there is Professor Calliope Fosecki and her research colleagues Elia Quinones and Katja Bobrova. And then I have my own colleague, Sandra Såger, also in this project. So we are a group of people that has done this research. We wanted to know something. We want to know how property owners, and that is for single family buildings, considers and evaluates different options before making decisions regarding energy efficiency. We also wanted to know the need of information and knowledge from authorities when making decisions. What are the needs from the property owners? But also, how does the need for tailored advice look like from the authority perspective? So we also have had workshops with authorities in order to also look at that side. And then, how do property owners' expectations for advice align with guidance and support provided by authorities? Do they match or do they not match? We wanted to know that. So the data collection was that we have made not many interviews. We have made only 16 in-depth interviews with owners or tenants in single-family buildings. And these buildings have been built between 1910 and 1970, so there is quite a big range. Mostly, I would say, interviews have been made in buildings built actually before 1950. I think it was just a couple of interviews made in the later age interval. And we picked out, it was not just random. We wanted to do the interviews with people that actually lived in buildings that had some kind of buildings with heritage values. So we picked some areas in Sweden in middle-sized Swedish towns and areas of villas or this one-family buildings that has been designated in the planning program as areas of interest. Like the one you see here, where they have put one area. Here is like a border. So the darker part here is decided. This part of this built environment is of specific interest, but you can also see the different dots, the red and the blue ones. The red ones are the highest, the buildings with the highest interest, and the blue is middle interest. So in these areas we went out, we talked to people, we put posters in their what to say, in the post boxes, and so we used this snowballing method to gather the interviewees. But UCL have also done these kind of studies in other countries, in UK, in Mexico, in Turkey, in Greece, for example. So we use the same interview scheme as the one that has been used in other countries, but we needed to make some national, what to say, changes, so the people that we interviewed could understand the questions, but as similar as possible. And then we also conducted step-by-step workshops in these areas. We had free areas that we investigated more thoroughly, and we had free workshops, and there we invited the people to come to the workshops, and we wanted to discuss energy efficiency in relation to what values they appreciated in their buildings. And then we had a material that would be more general than the ordinary interviews. And then we also had workshops with professionals from the heritage and energy field to see the authority perspective. The methodology, and I will not go into this as then I will use this, yeah. See if it works, yeah. Well, all research is step by step. We together with UCL, we made the design of the study. And then we did the interviews in Sweden, in Swedish. We were transcribing the interviews, and also we were translating the interviews, so we could compare that. And then we have made an open coding with the NVivo program. We have made thematic analysis, and then our colleagues in UCL have made these causal loop diagrams, and there I won't be able to go in depth, but I will show you how it looks like. The themes that we wanted to see is, we call it deep cities, but the relation to the place, you could say. We wanted to look into heritage conservation, into thermal comfort, and into energy efficiency. So there were the thematics that we also used to analyze the results that we got from the interviews. And by using this NVivo and this causal diagrams, you can get a lot of connections that we might not see when we meet the people and listen to the interviews. Here we can see that maybe there are some connections that are stronger than others, and maybe some connections are negative connections. So this kind of results can we use in this from this material. The blue arrows, see if it's with me now. No, it's not. This is...
No, it's up.
No, sorry.
It's the upper one.
Yes, it's the upper one. Yes, here. Now I'll try it here. Here you see one connection with the yellow, no, not the yellow, red, a red arrow. And that is a negative connection. So you have here the preservation of restoration of original features. Well, that is something that many people want to do with their houses. But then you need craftsman skills, and that could be difficult to find. And there is also costs that is connected to this. So this, what you say, this connection is combined like a negative loop, that maybe this is something that you need to do something about in order to make people take the step to hire a craftsman or to do something. Maybe it could be knowledge that they don't know about the real cost. It's just something they think about. So this is the way we have dealt with the material. So some summary from this, because the causal loop is messy. But we can see that homeowners, they appreciate heritage values, or I would say as it's connected to time. So the people that we have interviewed, we can see that the longer they have lived in their building, the more they actually appreciate values that could be connected to cultural values or heritage values. So there is a time perspective in how you appreciate values. And also the qualities of the house, where we talked about values and characteristics, they were crucial for making decisions regarding moving or buying a house. So we could also see that the place was really interested. They saw that this area is a place where they have heritage buildings, and that was something that was actually a big part in deciding to move there and buy the house. There are critical factors for the preservation of values when it's balanced with the need for a satisfactory indoor climate, energy efficiency and functionality. And maybe this is not what you say, it's not rocket science. That is maybe something that you could understand, that we would get these results, but we have it in this study. Conditions of original details and the knowledge of the property owner and the emotional attachment to the home are important aspects for careful renovation. And that also comes with time. And then we could see, as I said, this loop about skilled craftsmen was something that a lot of interviewees actually talked about when we met them, and the cost together with that. During the interview, I can say something that the interviews were done in the homeowner's house. So we met with them, we sat talking in the kitchen, and then we walked around together, pointing at different things that they appreciated or not. So we were always at least two people doing the interview. So we also would get some kind of connection to the building. Walking around, talking, making this quite, well, it was a semi-structured interview. But then we ended the interview with having this kind of checklist. What had they actually done about energy efficiency renovations, or just ordinary renovation, and what were they planning to do? So this is just a list. I won't read it, but it's already done. Quite, the low picking, the low hanging fruits that they picked. Changing light bulbs to LED, for example. Well, some of them actually have installed solar panels. So that is something people do living in single-family buildings in Sweden. And then they have adjust the systems and so on. Other renovations that has been done is facade renovation. They make window renovation, not only for the purpose to make them more energy efficient, but you need to do that anyway. They made some kind of floor plan modifications inside the building. But this was also connected. So some interviewees, they changed the plan because they thought maybe it was insufficient when they had bought the house. And these were mainly younger people coming to a building maybe built in the 1950s, and they saw we need to change it. We want a bigger kitchen. We don't want these small rooms. While the older interviewees really appreciated the original plan of their buildings. And it was really funny because when we met with them, at least in a 2 or 3 places, they talked about that it was really nice to be able to walk around and have like roundabout in your home, like it often is in traditional single-family buildings. But what they plan to do is installation of solar panels to say to give us some idea of what they actually were, what was in the pipeline in the coming years. Solar panels was almost on everyone's tongue at that moment. It could be because we did some of the interviews also during the latest energy crisis. That was because we started with these interviews just when we could meet with people after the COVID years. So we started in the winter 2 years ago to do the first interviews. But they also want to make additional insulation of attic floor structures because they think that is a good thing to do. But this is interesting because they actually don't know if it is the best thing to do to their building, because people owning their own home, they don't actually calculate on that in a proper way. So maybe it is not the best thing to do, but they think about it like also one of these easy things to do. The workshop, I don't have any picture from this workshops, but we did like a game, not the not the water molecule game, but we made like a game. So we had sketches of buildings, and we had small cards, and we wanted the participants to draw what part of the buildings they thought was really important for the character that they didn't want to destroy. And then they had small cards with different kind of energy efficiency measures that they could also put on and rank, so we could get this combination. So in this workshops, the identified qualities and characteristics was of course the windows, always the windows. And they also thought if a building had ornamentations and details in the facade, that was really important. They also appreciate high quality materials, and original features was also important. And then about energy efficiency measures, they thought simple and low cost measures that you do first, and that was almost everyone agreed on that, except for some people that wanted to do more deep renovation, but they were fewer. Insulation was talked about in different ways. So and since it was a workshop, we didn't have time to go in depth what they actually meant with that. And then they also talked about renovating and sealing existing windows, of course. So what we are saying what we can hear the advisors saying from energy advisors and so on, that is actually also thought about from the house owners. We asked about what they regret if they had made any changes to the buildings that they had regret. And here are some quotes. We read about the energy savings from window replacement, but then I saw the price, and I regretted considering it. We also lost the charm of the old windows. We installed solar heating on the roof, but we didn't think it had much effect. It was expensive, and we don't feel it paid off. That was also something that was said about things they regretted. What they thought was successful. Choosing to renovate the windows instead of replacing them was the best decision we made. We kept the house's original character while also improving energy efficiency. So there is also the windows. So windows was on top of everything. The ground source heat pump was an expensive investment, but it is probably the best thing we have done for the house. It heats up perfectly, and our energy bill is halved. So that is also something that came up. And in Sweden, air-to-air heat pump is I guess it's profitable business to be in, because we can see that this is installed almost everywhere. And this is something that also this is also for heat and for cooling in the summer, of course. They also said something about, what could be more sustainable measures that they had done, so like in long term. And then I have some quotes here. When we think about renovations, we always consider what's best for the house in the long run. It's not just about money, it's about preserving what makes the house unique. And we always try to find solutions that both save energy and preserve the house's essence. Sometimes it costs more, but it's worth it in the long run. Now I would say that these areas of single-family buildings, they had been quite ordinary areas before, but since they are in middle-sized cities, and the villas or the buildings in these areas have been built between 1910, 1920 up to 1970, they are now quite close to the city center, so it has been some kind of upgrading in social economic demography in this area. So that could be also one. It's always a bias in these studies, of course. People that like the questions, they want to be interviewed, and not the other ones that are not interested in these issues. So to say something about this study is that the neighborhood character is important for almost everyone. We can see that. They appreciate architectural variation. So this is like mixed areas. They have a concern for changes made both to their own buildings, but also changes made by neighbors. That is interesting. There is a connection between like authenticity and some kind of nostalgic thinking from the house owner perspective. And there is a big interest in original material, original features, original decorations, and so on. We could also see that they thought that a lot of people that not a lot of, because they were not so many, but they thought that they wanted to hand over something to other generations because they had been taking over something, at least the ones that we interviewed that lived in buildings built in the first part of this time sequence. And the preservation of the house's history was important. And we could also see that they talked about like the cozy factor of the house. They wanted it to be nice in their home. They wanted to have, like some people, if they had a fireplace, they appreciated the fireplace. If they didn't have a fireplace, they were thinking about having a fireplace because that was something that made the home more cozy. And that could also be connected to energy, actually. So I will stop here with this because we are on the way to publish some papers together with our colleagues in UCL during the last weeks in this year, like ending the project. So I just wanted to tell you about that we have done this, and it's really interesting to look at this and to do it in the perspective of the building stock and the the energy efficiency potential that I've been working with earlier, to see what are people actually thinking. And I think that was something we talked about yesterday when we talked about one of the European projects. So before ending, I will tell you about another European project. No, that was the summary. I will already said that. We also, the Future His project that Philippe from ICOMOS talked about yesterday, is one of the Horizon project about energy efficiency in buildings, or maybe also resource effectiveness in buildings in Europe. Another project that was successful in another call with similar questions is the Inherit project, where we are also participating. And here we are also looking at next generation solutions for heritage buildings. In this project, we try to look at all the perspectives that you need to look at if you're going to have a sustainable future for the built heritage. So we look at societal, scientific, and technological process to do this. And so the stakeholders are important. We have workshops with them, not only with the house owners, but with stakeholders from different kind of organizations, to see how they manage the built heritage for the future. And then, of course, we are doing some tests. We are measuring in some buildings also, because it's a lot of engineers working in this project too. So we are measuring and we are trying new techniques and so on. But we also talk to the stakeholders in the areas. And one of the case study or pilots are Visby, Sweden. And here we again want to come back to the building stock. What do we need to do on a building stock level? While the other case studies or pilots are looking at single buildings. And mainly it is buildings used for public interests. There are a couple of multifamily buildings, but mainly it is public buildings, and then the building stock of Visby in Sweden. We are a lot of partners, and the Singular Logic is a company in Greece that is leading this project, and we will be ready in 27 or 28, I think. Then we will see what we will come up with. So with this presentation from the homeowner study, and just saying that Inherit exists, please look us up. We started not more than 1 year ago. What do you say? Results will come during the coming years from this project. So I just wanted to tell you this. And here is also UCL with us, but in another sense, another department there. So actually, I will say thank you for listening. And if there is questions, please.
I must also say that we have done a very similar study actually last year in Estonia.
Yeah.
It's actually, the report I believe is generally in Estonian, but there's a small conclusion in English, I believe.
Also in English, 2 pages.
2 pages, yeah. But
Yes, please do.
But
And,
we
yeah.
explored very similar topics.
Yeah.
How people are renovating, why, what is their motivation, how do they feel about their building being potentially part of Estonia's cultural heritage, etc. So it was very interesting to see some of the correlations that you found. For example, we noticed that the longer a homeowner has lived in the house, or even if they have built themselves, the less inclined, for example, they are towards renovation works. The less they notice the renovation need of their building. Did you notice anything like that?
That they did?
You brought out that the longer a resident has lived in the building, the more they appreciate its value.
Yeah.
For example, we found that they are less likely to actually renovate the building if they have lived in the building long, or even if they have built the building themselves. Did you notice anything like that?
Yeah, but it's not obvious in the answers.
You need to read between the lines.
Yes, because if you have lived in a building longer, you're a little bit older, and you might not. I remember I didn't do all the interviews. I did more than half, but some of the interviewees talked about the windows, that they might do something, but maybe it's not worth it. But it was not obvious that they didn't want to do anything.
And I'm glad that you mentioned windows. That actually, in Estonia, for example, windows are the most common structure to be replaced.
Yeah.
Actually, in terms of any renovation works, windows are among the most common. Actually, did you notice the same in Sweden?
Yes, it is, but I don't think it is as common as in Estonia. But there is a very, tough market that people selling new windows, they can convince people that it will be paid off. But if you count on it, it won't pay off. At least not until many years ahead. And that is something that is not said. So I think we could do something to actually make calculations on what is the payoff time for changing windows in relation to of course, the climate footprints and so on. Because I think that is something we need to discuss, because there is a lot of now I lost it in English, but if you produce new windows, that makes
carbon footprint.
Carbon footprint. Thank you very much. And that is something we don't account when we look at this, and also the cost for changing.
And we have also noticed that if you replace wooden windows, that can be restored, and their life cycle can be technically centuries if you maintain them. But if the most common solution in Estonia is PVC windows, and if you say that the investment will pay off, let's say 30 years, that might actually be the whole life cycle of the PVC windows. Actually.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. If the quality is poor, let's say it might be longer.
Yeah.
But there's the thing that you can't pass down PVC windows to to the next generation. They just don't last that long, and you can't restore them.
No.
Okay.
And we need to actually have figures on this, not because when we say this, we don't have people that has made. There is not so much research about this, and we need the research in order to. There are some, yes, but in Sweden we haven't made it from a Swedish perspective, and we need to have that. But in UK,
it's a step line. It's often shown as straight line. But it's a step. Every time you have to replace or do major work, that steps up. And so what looks like a great bargain suddenly isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but I believe that we have time for a small break. Let's reconvene at 5 o'clock. Thank you very much, Petra.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh.
So I don't want to keep you. So I'm very glad to have an opportunity to speak about to provide an Estonian perspective to these issues of energy efficiency and our cultural heritage. We have, I'm sure, a lot of discussion has surrounded listed and protected buildings. However, in the case of Estonia, we have quite a bit of architectural heritage that is not protected, not listed, however, but will still be included in the renovation wave. So I will give a few brief facts concerning where Estonia is currently in terms of the renovation wave and legislation. What do we know about the existing solutions and where to go, and what is the approximate outlook for the future? So about myself, I'm Alois, and I work as a project researcher under the Estonian Open Air Museum as part of the Build Us project right here. And without further ado, let's begin. First, a bit about energy efficiency. As we all know, this entire conference is framed as somewhat around this. The European Union has taken the goal of achieving a carbon neutral building stock by year 2050, as buildings currently account for up to about 40% of the energy consumed in the EU. For this reason, each member state was asked to compile a long-term strategy for building renovation. And these are the numbers laid out in the Estonian legislation. We see that a private or single family or detached houses, however you want to call them, I will be referring to them as detached houses, have the lowest number in terms of total area in terms of the building stock, but in absolute numbers is several times larger, which is quite obvious here. Which means that we have a lot of detached houses to renovate, and we have also considered that a number of buildings will be falling out of use, some are renovated, but the total number we have arrived is 105,000 detached houses. My presentation was centered around non-listed buildings. However, I will be going more in depth in terms of dwellings. So I will be leaving out buildings with a public function and buildings in more urban areas. So I will be focusing more on detached housing in more lower density areas. So in Estonia, a renovated building ought to comply with minimum standards for energy efficiency, which in Estonia means energy class C, which means that in turn the total yearly primary energy consumption per square meter needs to be between 185 and 140, depending on the size of the building. There are 3 different classes for detached houses. Listed buildings are exempt from this currently. And what forms the energy efficiency of a building? We have its boundary surface properties, which affects its heat transmissions, air leakage, and thermal bridging. Its compactness, how the heated space is placed within the heated volume. Is it placed all around the massing, or is it all clumped together? The type of heat source, how efficient it is. Its ventilation solution. Is there a ventilation solution? Is it is the ventilation solution mechanical or natural? What types of auxiliary devices and lighting the building uses? How many of the devices are used and how efficient they are? And what standards for indoor climate have we established? Are we satisfied with, let's say, 15 degrees as an indoor temperature during the winter months? Or do we require higher standards for this? And also that also applies in terms of air exchange. So what can we do to improve the energy efficiency of a building? We can upgrade its boundary surface properties, meaning we can insulate them and we can reduce air leakages. We can upgrade the heating system, which means we can apply more efficient or use more environmentally friendly heat sources and more efficient methods of heat distribution. Ventilation, we can apply a ventilation system with heat recovery, because if we need to reduce air leakages, that means that any form of natural ventilation needs to be switched off, and all ventilation needs to be done mechanically. But that also gives us the opportunity to use heat recovery. And the question of how many and what types of auxiliary devices do we use. Do we use more devices, less devices? Do we upgrade their efficiency? Do we replace older devices with more efficient ones? And can we produce energy locally from renewable resources, which is where photovoltaic panels come into play? What we can't are unlikely to change are the compactness of our building, rearranging any heated space that can be very costly and isn't really sensible in a building usually if it's historic. And the standards for indoor climate are another area where we can't really make currently it has been established that we shouldn't make any concessions in terms of indoor climate. We shouldn't accept lower indoor temperatures or poor air quality. However, there are points of discussion around this as well that can be had. Now, we have looked at the energy performance side, but we also need to take into consideration the architectural quality of the renovation project, as that is not, I would argue, is not only an issue of aesthetics or heritage, but also it has a quantifiable dimension in the building's life cycle. Here's an example where, with the goal of achieving higher energy efficiency, the outer wall has been insulated, but while doing that, any historical character of the building has been lost, and all we get is this like white square in the end that's supposed to, I don't know, create a better facade dynamic or whatever. So, yeah. So, I would argue that if the renovation project begins, or the building owners begin renovation projects by replacing the historical details and materials with relatively cheap modern products, they ignore the structural issues or use improper repair techniques. Sure, the building, once renovated, let's say that the renovation solutions are fine for like 20 to 30 years, but after that, the renovation will need to be renovated. And the negative scenario is that when you're looking at the building, everything original has been lost. The building doesn't really look that good anymore. There's a lot of structural issues. And in the end, the worst scenario is when the homeowner starts to question, why should I renovate this building? And the worst scenario is when the real estate value of the plot will is more profitable without the building than with it, which means that the owner is more motivated in actually demolishing it and selling a clear plot to a developer or a homeowner who would like to build a new home on this plot than renovating it, which means that improper renovation where the building loses its architectural character has an impact in the life cycle of the building, which has an impact in the carbon footprint in the building as well. So this is a case from Tallinn. What happens when a historic building is renovated into an anonymous box? Yeah, that building actually was in a protected zone, I'm pretty sure, but during the 2000s, it received a new facade. The windows were replaced, a new roof, probably a new heating system. Pretty sure the interior was gutted as well. And in terms of energy performance, the building might have been fine, but when it came to what actually happened, the building was torn down because people weren't either motivated to step in, or it might have been actually that the plot of the land was more valuable without this building, basically. So this is like an example where improper renovation actually destroyed the value of the building, which also had an impact in its life cycle, which meant that the carbon footprint of the potential for a building with a lowered carbon footprint was ruined essentially. And what happens when a historic building is renovated with attention to details and proportion? The cycle can repeat itself. Sure, this is a building from the museum right here. This is actually our office building. So this building was also probably somewhat in danger of receiving this early 2000s Euro renovation, Euroremondi renovation package, where all detail might have been stripped. It might be insulated, but luckily, but the all architectural character was in very much danger. Would have been very big danger. However, we see that did not happen, and all the architectural details were preserved, and they were able to be reused or taken as an example when renovating the building. And in 50 years, probably, this building has a higher potential of being renovated again, because the value is there, the inspiration is there, the heritage is still preserved in that way. So I've spoken about listed heritage and briefly about listed and unlisted heritage. Now, unlisted heritage is the part of the building stock. Well, the exact definition of what is heritage and what is not is in the air. However, we here agree that most buildings erected before World War II do carry some aspect of cultural heritage with it. So we know that approximately 30% of the detached housing stock in Estonia was built before World War II. That makes that about 60,000 buildings. And we know that the predominant construction method for these buildings was log. And most of these buildings do represent some aspect of cultural heritage in Estonia. In terms of whether these buildings become listed or protected or not, we have three ways for heritage building to be placed under some form of protection, either national or local in Estonia. They can be listed. They can be by building, by plot, or by complex. We have more than 5,000 listings today. We can list an entire area or settlement. We have about 12. Then these two first aspects are listed objects that we can count. The next two, protection zones and mille valuable areas, the exact number of buildings in those zones are more difficult to estimate. And then the third option is any architectural heritage within national parks, where the natural environment is protected alongside the local cultural heritage. So for an old building in a rural area to be protected, these are mainly the only methods that can be considered. Examples of unlisted heritage that might not fit under those umbrellas can be barn dwellings in Estonia, the most archaic form of dwelling, or they might be detached houses without the barn dwelling is characterized by its threshing room, where under one roof the agricultural rooms with an agricultural function and residential function are joined under one roof, or it can be entirely a building with an entirely residential function. Then we have early 20th century farm architecture from both wood and stone. And then as examples from 20s and 30s, from the time of the First Estonian Republic. Now these are the nicer ones. These are what the average picture more or less looks like. They are used as summer homes, or it's also quite common for the upper floors to fall out of use, which means that the residents use primarily, for example, the lower floors, which leads to some form of neglect on the upper floors. These buildings, the owners try to renovate them, but they somewhat understand that they have a building that can be considered as cultural heritage. So they understand that it's a difficult project, but still it's their main dwelling. They don't really have a plan B in terms of like an apartment to go during the winter time. So they still need to improve the energy efficiency with any means that they can. Again, going back to the question of replacing the windows. Or we have also examples where they still try to insulate the exterior walls, but then they don't do anything with the roof, or they exchange windows during different periods with different solutions, etc. So this is like the more the average picture in terms of the unlisted heritage that we have in Estonia. And in terms of statistic, the maximum number of dwellings like this in low-density areas that can be potentially classified as cultural heritage, I would estimate is around 40,000. This is the maximum number. It can be. It's quite likely that it can be lower than this, but I still wanted to start with the maximum. And the number that is listed is approximately 50, 0.1%. Now, I don't want to say that being listed is automatically means that the building's cultural heritage can be preserved. Unfortunately, that does not guarantee preservation, unfortunately. But still, this means that only 1% we have any control or over how these buildings are, how the heritage of these buildings is maintained. The rest, 950,000, are left entirely to the homeowners themselves to preserve the heritage of that building. Now, what is their existing state in terms of energy performance? What renovation measures do we need to do? We do need to account that these buildings have some form of existing energy conservation measures. For example, when we talk about log buildings, the horizontal placement and the compression provided relatively airtight joints. Internal rendering and wallpaper improved airtightness as well. For example, in Estonia today we have this trend of exposing the interior log surface to display this sort of rustic interior, which actually removes a layer of energy conservation in the building. Joints between windows, doors, and walls were tightened and then covered with. They might not be decorative, but any joints between the windows and walls were always covered as much as possible. For example, today in Estonia, when windows are replaced, this boarding between the window and wall can be neglected, left only with insulation foam that starts to decay very quickly in the sun. We applied internal winter window frames for the colder months. The traditional window type in Estonia, the summer frames open outward, and then for the winter we have another frame that is one large monolithic frame that doesn't really open. There can be like a ventilation section that can be open, but usually. They basically installed this sort of double glazing principle, even in traditional dwellings. Also, the internal layout of dwellings provided the opportunity of dividing the house into sections with different levels of indoor climate. This is, for example, any entry halls, verandas. For example, when in winter you open the door, it doesn't lead into a heated chamber right away. You have this sort of transitional spaces for entering the building, so that the heat doesn't escape out through the open doors. And you have winter and summer rooms. Rooms that you heat during the winter, and then and rooms that you do not heat, that you use only during the summer months. And also the modern expectations for indoor climate have become somewhat distant from the way of life that these old dwellings were built for. Having low temperatures on the floor and putting on like woolen socks and wearing an extra layer of sweaters was not. It was part of the way of life in these buildings. Like today's expectations that I want to walk barefoot in the house and I want 21 degrees everywhere. There is a gray area in how appropriate such requirements in a historic house actually are. And also the aspect of ventilation was provided naturally through the air leakages in the windows through any gaps in the doors, it functioned thanks to heating stoves. So nowadays, when we seal the air leakages, we seal the windows, we use heat pumps. We arrive at the problem that the building isn't ventilated anymore, which leads us to the requirement of using mechanical ventilation.
And in terms of the measured energy performance of such historical dwellings, unfortunately, while we can apply these sort of passive or energy conservation measures, the energy class does not go beyond class G. And studies show that the most effective measures are insulating the external walls, installing ventilation systems with heat recovery, and improving heating systems. Insulating the external walls is among the most, let's say, controversial energy conservation measures, because that has there's the danger of defacing the facade with the external insulation. However, we can't really get over the fact that it is among the most efficient energy conservation measures. And in Estonia currently, to achieve energy class C, the following deep renovation works are generally necessary. And this list is quite rigid. There can be examples where, let's say, you insulate the roof, let's say, a little bit more, and you can like insulate the walls a little bit less. But these numbers, for example, 200 millimeters of external insulation, 200 millimeters of insulation of the roof, double or triple glazed windows, etc., etc. These measures are in their this full list is unfortunately commonly necessary if we don't apply any exceptions to these unlisted buildings. And the question of internal versus external insulation, experience shows that any more than 5 centimeters of interior insulation can be problematic in terms of moisture. So it is possible that perhaps with calculations and moisture barriers and ventilation, a little bit more is possible, but the 200 millimeters that you generally need for the required energy class is not possible when insulating the interior. However, external insulation is safe in terms of any condensation and mold and bacterial and fungal growth. And there have been studies where, let's say, we have an actually listed building or protected building, and there have been explorations, okay, can we somehow maintain the proportion of the building pre-renovation with adding insulation with equal means throughout the entire dwelling? And for this example building in Võru, they did achieve this, that the external silhouette of the building remained exactly the same, although the added insulation thicknesses are also up to the required amount. So experience shows that if it works on listed buildings, there is potential that we can potentially apply it for unlisted buildings as well. However, we can't underestimate the cost of such a renovation project. And also, renovation works, while they may be motivated by raising the energy performance, deep renovation works must also include improvements to meet the following requirements in Estonia. So we start with structural stability and load bearing capacity, fire safety, having a clean, healthy and safe living environment, safety of use, noise protection, and then number 6 is conservation of the resources and energy efficiency, which means that works on energy efficiency should also ensure that the structure that is being renovated or the dwelling as a whole also meets these requirements, which one can imagine makes the renovation project even more complicated. And the main idea is that there's no sense to adding insulation to damaged structures, which means that we also need insights into what is the technical condition of the housing stock in Estonia as well, that before we talk about any energy conservation measures and adding insulation. So we have done several studies in Estonia to explore this question, to understand what are the homeowners doing currently, what have they been doing, what are they planning to do, and what is their mindset. So I will be introducing roughly 3 studies, or like different aspects of each study. So the first study had a fieldwork method where a number of buildings in the Esno and Kareda region in Estonia were inventoried,
There were two types of buildings generally. There were log houses built between 1900 and 1939. And then we had the Soviet era, more modernized architecture from the 1970s to the 1980s. So there were like these two, and which were also built from aerated concrete. So we had this like two different building typologies that we were also able to compare. And the rundown of the different building types, log buildings are here. We had 29 detached houses, 6 more archaic barn dwellings, 2 modernized barn dwellings, and 73% of these buildings had permanent residence and were used year-round, which means that insulation and energy conservation measures were very important. However, 27% were in use for limited periods, for example, as holiday homes. And for those owners, renovation generally entailed was described more as repair and maintenance rather than adding insulation. So looking at what the homeowners are renovating and fixing, we can see that the highest parts, the building parts with the highest renovation rates are the interior, the windows and heating systems. And the lowest are rainwater systems, which were critically low, roofs and foundations and floors. So basically anything that the homeowner can see on an everyday basis was of the highest priority, and anything that was more concealed. Let's say, I have a theory that the foundations that can be very low, covered in like foliage and very low to the ground, they might be the parts of the building that the homeowner actually literally noticed the least, because they have the smallest surface area, and they had the smallest likelihood of being renovated, because there's probably this sort of like trends in terms of like the renovation practice. So I insulate the walls and the windows and the roof and to replace the heating system. That perhaps like renovation of foundations is that perhaps just not that common between discussions of homeowners that homeowners have with each other. And we also noticed that the renovation is generally done in stages, meaning that the homeowners phases out their renovation works into like manageable steps that they can like imagine. They do it by building section, they do it by room, they do it by facade, sometimes even window by window. And why the windows, the interior and heating systems are the most common, it's likely that their poor condition is the most noticeable on an everyday basis. If you live inside a room, you notice if the wallpaper is poor, you notice if the window has a draft, you notice that if your heating system is poor. So this is likely why these are the most commonly renovated aspects of the building. However, we know that the actual energy savings that you have by renovating a window is actually not that noticeable. Yeah, in terms of thermal comfort, sure, you might have less drafts during the winter, but in terms of the total energy performance, it might not be that great. It depends on the building, how much window area the building has, how poor the original windows are, but it is not among the most efficient energy conservation measures. And well, doing the interior is just aesthetics, basically. And yeah, again, while the foundations, the floors, and the roofs are the least done, the work is likely very inconvenient. You can't really replace a roof in stages. Well, you can do it, but it's difficult. And like also renovating floors, you can't really live inside the room if you need to replace it. So if you don't really have enough space for the family to like move out of one room and into the other, perhaps, then it might not be possible of renovating the floor. And also the owner's lack of technical know-how or awareness of good building practices. There's very much this culture of self-building or consulting your relatives, your friends, your neighbors, and like building forums online in which kind of energy renovation measures are the most proper and which kinds of material to use. There aren't really that many technical trustworthy information sources available today in Estonia. We are improving that. However, a lack of technical know-how is technically an issue. And when looking at what is the average condition of these structures, you may notice that some structures are not present due to a technical oversight. Some of these structures were simply not inventoried due to human error, but they were evaluated with a score of 0 to 5, 5 being very good, 0 being critical state, needs immediate renovation. And we can see that the average condition ranged from satisfactory to good. No structures are perfect, let's say. And when comparing it to the other building typology, the aerated concrete buildings from the 1970s and onwards, I can say that their technical condition was better. And we can see that in terms of block buildings, the highest overall condition were upon the structures that were most commonly renovated, the heating appliances, the interior, and for example, the doors. And the lowest condition was noticed for the least renovated structures, again, foundations and drainage systems. And also comparing unrenovated and renovated average conditions, we see that the condition does improve. However, no average condition reaches the optimal state. And again, comparing to aerated concrete structures, they were much more closer to the perfect score than these historic log dwellings. And we noticed also that heating systems were a point lower after renovation when comparing to pre-renovation state. And this was a bit confusing, but I have a theory that this is likely owing to the fact that if a heating system is updated, the most common solution was having an air-to-air heat pump, which was accompanied by a broken stove or faulty heating system, which brought the overall average score of the entire heating system of the building lower. So the building was renovated, but as a complete whole, the heating methods of the building was poor, because for example, if the air-to-air heat pump fails due to an electrical shortage during the wintertime, that building has no backup anymore. So that is likely what is going on here with why renovated heating systems were not in an optimal condition. And also, we ranked these buildings. We had 37 buildings. We added up all the condition scores of each structure and also compared how many renovation works were highlighted. And we're looking at the lowest end of the ranking. This building was lived in during inventory. This was someone's house. The number of renovation works was 0, and it was the absolute lowest building. And we see that the next building isn't doing any better. We see that the homeowner is doing something, but the renovation works are uncoordinated, they're haphazard, and the technical condition of the structures was not being improved, very likely. This is the middle area. We have, let's say, 5 renovation works or 5 structures somewhat renovated. We get the average ranking. This is where we see, let's say that the historic windows have been replaced with PVC windows. We can see that the foundation has been somewhat insulated, but the roof hasn't been, so nothing has been done with the roof. And for example, here we see that the facade has been renovated, likely the heating system, some windows are replaced, but again, nothing has been done with the roof. And the top of the ranking was interesting. We see that we have 2 buildings. The position or the total score is comparable, 35 and 37, but the number of conducted renovation works was the difference was doubled. This building had renovated 11 structures, this building only 6, but the technical condition was basically the same in terms of this evaluation structure. So this led us to a conclusion that maintenance, preserving the existing structures with yearly maintenance actually is comparable to a condition where the building structure has been allowed to deteriorate, and then the condition has been improved with the renovation works. But in the end, only in terms of technical condition, not energy performance. But this homeowner likely achieved this good condition with a smaller total investment than when compared to this building, which again highlights the importance of maintenance. And this special mention, this had the highest score, the highest number of renovation works, but it was excluded from the sample. Why? Discussions with this owner, they said that they renovated, they improved all the structures, but later it came out that for them renovation meant demolishing the entire thing down to the foundation and building a replica. So this building technically we can't call this a renovation, but this is how certain homeowners interpret the renovation way, basically. And we can see this also among developers and among people who have the finances, let's say, to build an entirely new building, that renovating faulty structures and then improving their energy performance and also its architectural appearance, the cost becomes so great that demolishing the structure becomes easier. And again, it comes down to maintenance, because in terms of the total cost, if the building is not maintained, if you indeed need to make improvements everywhere in the building, then this scenario becomes far more likely for the homeowner. And this is not what we're actually looking for in the renovation wave. And in Esna-Kareda, we also looked at the amount of preservation of cultural heritage, inventorying surviving original material, the form and massing of the building, and the architectural details. We noticed that in terms of material and the form of the building, it was relatively okay. However, details are the most vulnerable in terms of these three categories, because they're the easiest to remove, the easiest to replace, and the least likely to be placed back onto the facade once any external insulation has been placed. And it was also noticed that the construction market in Estonia doesn't seem very accommodating to historical details. It needs a lot of, tailored. It requires a tailored approach that might not be very accessible to a lot of homeowners. And we noticed that dwellings built during the 1970s with more modernized architecture, again, since they showed more successful results when compared to historic dwellings in terms of the renovation works, we can conclude that newer dwellings are easier to renovate. The window division is more close to modern solutions. The facades are simple when comparing these two buildings. And from this, we can also conclude that not all homeowners are placed at the equal starting point. We have the same finish line, C energy class, but different homeowners of different building types some homeowners start from a lot further away than other ones, but we still expect them to have the same finishing point, and that might become a real problem. And not in terms of preserving the cultural heritage, which is definitely another problem that will need to be addressed. But in terms of the renovation wave itself, different building types some building types are more vulnerable to these aspects. And also, even again, going back to why the construction market is not very well equipped for dealing with these questions, even if the homeowner wants to preserve the window division, they run into difficulties in finding a good producer for the windows, or knowing how to even order good replicas. These are like two examples from two different buildings. This is the characteristic window division for the building, and this is what the owner came up with. Again, probably the homeowner might not have been perhaps that motivated to keep it. We don't really know what the story was behind this window. We can see like similar lines that they were inspired by it, but again, something went wrong with either the ordering of the window, or how they drew it, or how detailed like the request of the owner was to the factory. And here we see where the owner did put in the effort. They wanted exact replicas, and we can see that like the thought is there, but the proportions are messed up. Was it? It's also almost as if someone orally described the window, but entirely missed the proportions. And we don't know again how the process went, which part of the like supply chain became faulty. But this homeowner expressed actual regret in replacing their windows, and regretted getting this and this result. They felt that they did everything right. They had the resources, they had the motivation to get the best result possible, but something still went wrong, and that was among the most unfortunate stories that we heard. And then there's also the architectural question in Estonia, where a lot of windows were enlarged during the Soviet era. And again, we have different windows in the building. For example, we have this slimmer window type that is divided in half. We have this wider one with a more asymmetric division. Then we have this triple frame solution, and then we get this in the roof dormer window. So which division should the homeowner follow? Which one is the architecturally appropriate one? They ordered this. I believe this is simply the closest thing that they came up with. But even for an architect, this is not an easy situation to work with, actually. And that is another issue that might need to be addressed when helping homeowners. And also, how to combine an authentic window division with modern needs for outdoor access and added daylight. The homeowner wanted a terrace door, and then how do you pair it with a historic window? The division becomes all messed up when you pair it right next to it. And also, if you keep a modern like a historic window here, but a modern door here, you can tell the difference, that they're not going to be the same. Like, how do you solve this situation? Do you tell the homeowner, no, you can't have this terrace window? However, the request for more daylight is a very reasonable request, actually, in my view. So this situation is also that we can ask the homeowners of authentic divisions, window divisions, but there is a lot going on here than simply asking them to follow the authentic, simply copy like the old division from photographs, because the existing situation might not even be those windows might not be applicable anymore. They might be wider. They might be extended into doors, etc. And that was Esna Koredo, fieldwork. Then we also had a statistical method in studying what are the common damage types. The Estonian Open Air Museum provides coordinates consultation services for owners of these historic rural buildings, specifically non-listed buildings, and it has been an ongoing process from 2015. And from 2019, I believe, these actually from each consultation a report is compiled, and from 2019 this report was beginning to be entered into a central database with a fixed structure, which means that all this data can be studied, was able to be studied later statistically as well. And by 2023 we had more than 300 buildings and more than 1,000 structures evaluated. The structure of the report had this breakdown where you have the type of damage, you have the damage structure, you have the material of the structure, photographs, the description of the damage, and a renovation recommendation from the consultant. And
each report contained data concerning the construction year, what is the general history of the building, and as I described, the building properties, its structures, the damage types, the details of the damage details, and the renovation recommendations. And this statistical info was studied as part of a master's thesis. And the main breakdown was based on building structure, damage detail, and suspected cause for deterioration. And we did need to filter some of these buildings, so we ended up with 208 dwellings, 115 detached houses, and 93 barn dwellings. We found that the most commonly damaged structures were the walls, roofs, and foundations. Basically, the exterior structures that are in constant contact with the external climate. And then we get to the ceilings, windows, floors, heating, chimneys. Sometimes not even damage was described, or because the reports also highlight if a structure was in good condition, or if a structure had any specific heritage value that the homeowner ought to preserve during the renovation process. And we also mapped out what the different damage types can be. As you can see, we have a simple junction between the foundation, the floor, and the log wall, also a window, and the list of damages or potential risky solutions is very long. That the potential for damage transfer was very, very high. You have a damaged windowsill that leads to a damaged log wall. You have a leak in the roof. You have a damaged roof rafter. You have a damaged ceiling beam. Then you have a damaged floor, etc. And even like small things, basically, like foliage against the foundation, or a ground level that has risen during the decades. All of that leads to problems under the floor, in the log wall, and increases again the investment that the homeowner will need to do in the renovation wave. Again, we can talk about the insulation aspect, but all of these potential damages from these small things that are related to maintenance will also need to be fixed during the renovation. And that increases the original investment for the homeowners and makes the process exponentially more difficult for them. Again, everything that can go wrong in a roof, missing or damaged ridge boards, faulty joints of the rafters, broken collar beams, poor water tightness of the roof covering, localized decay between inner roof plates, shifted plate logs, missing rain gutter systems. There, again, to state a lot of points where damage can creep in and create a lot of problems that will need to be fixed. And a third study, we also, in terms of heritage, wanted to see how do the homeowners view their own situation, let's say, what is their motivation to renovate, how they have renovated their houses, etc. And that study is very much related to Petra's presentation of the study that we did with Kontorimor. The total sample of buildings included 98,000 homes in Estonia, and we got 978 responses, a very nice 1% representation. It was done as a questionnaire, either online or by phone. And we, again, measured a lot of technical aspects in terms of how do they evaluate the indoor climate, or how do they heat their homes, what renovation measures have they used. But as I've already broken that down in this presentation, I didn't want to go over that again as time is limited. But I wanted to highlight this interesting question, part of the questionnaire, where homeowners were asked to evaluate the questions of cultural heritage and emotional connection to their building. And we see that if homeowners were asked whether their house had emotional value to them, purple meant a positive answer. We have 91%. We have a positive answer, which means that 91% of homeowners view their homes as very emotional. They are emotionally attached to their homes. And also, 77% say that they value historical architecture. So the ground is there to develop renovation solutions that actually consider the architecture, the cultural heritage of the buildings. There is a sort of readiness to accept the renovation process where these details are a part of the comprehensive renovation process. And the rest of these answers basically support this. I think it's possible to maintain architectural value while improving energy efficiency. 60% homeowners agree with this. And 52% agree that their house is a good example of cultural heritage that deserves preservation. If we break this down into statistics, again, half of 98,000 homeowners believe this, which again, we arrive at the number of approximately like 40,000 buildings that might potentially carry cultural heritage in Estonia. Sure, some homeowners might overestimate this view, some might underestimate this, but I believe that this statistic is somewhat important in keeping in mind how we approach the renovation wave and these owners of non-listed heritage buildings. And the future, briefly, we've spoken about these sort of wooden early 20th century architectural heritage, but also we have started looking at the Soviet period. We have certain milieu value areas where Soviet era detached housing has been declared as somewhat protected. And as time goes on, I believe that this line starts coming closer to us. So right now, our attention might be on this type of architecture, but I pose the question, when does this type of architecture begin to be viewed as needing protection or deserving protection? And on it goes until we end up in the 1990s. Not today. This will be left to decide it to the next generation probably, but we need to understand that our actions in the renovation wave will impact how future generations will be able to conserve what they interpret as architecture, as cultural heritage to them. And there is somewhat danger that we are making a decision for them that they might not be able to overturn if they see it fit. And some words about Build Us project. The Open Air Museum is part of two work packages, developing technical solutions and information material for both homeowners and specialists. And part of this work package is studying the detached housing stock, establishing the extent of existing renovation works and their quality, establishing common damages and renovation mistakes, and establishing best renovation practices. And also raising awareness among homeowners and specialists through events, such as this one. But more on work package 2, the previous studies that I showed were all part of that work package. And when developing these technical solutions, I have provided several principles that might potentially be taken into account when these solutions are established. For example, primarily focusing on external insulation or replacing old insulation with more efficient materials, maintaining architectural proportions according to building type, regardless if it's protected now or whether we see potential that this type of architecture might deserve preservation. Preserving historical details or trying to nudge the construction market to to make it easier for the homeowner to produce or find replicas. Recommending the use of durable and accessible renovation solutions, but trying to ensure that it's also historically appropriate to the building type and the original construction material. So, for example, we don't recommend
For example, if we talk about this sort of rainfall protectors against that's between the foundation and the wall, so this sort of offset that is usually protected with like this slanted board. For example, a historically appropriate solution might be putting back a wooden board, but we know that its durability is not good, so we would recommend placing like a piece of sheet metal across it as well to protect it from decay. So these sort of small improvements, I believe, are warranted, but still, whenever possible, any like historical tradition ought to be preserved. And also providing insight into conducting staged deep renovation. That as we see that there's a large self-building culture in Estonia, and homeowners do prefer to renovate in stages, we also need to take this into account when providing renovation solution, that we don't expect the homeowner to do it all in one go, to provide them with the alternative to do it in like piecemeal steps, basically. Highlighting the importance of junctions, because that is one of the main problematic points. It's not just how much insulation you add, it's how it all meets with the roof eave and the dormer windows. Those are the weak points in terms of the building proportion. Not only the question of how much the new facade is going to be offset from the old one, and taking into account the preferences and likely limitations of the homeowner. And we have established 3 levels of information. First, the information material. We start with the basics. So the basic structural elements of a building, how to evaluate current technical state, how to evaluate the necessary scope and depth of repair works, what are the most cost optimal energy conservation measures, and basics of deep renovation versus stage renovation. And this is to eliminate this first feeling of confusion that homeowners might have. So it's not, the homeowner might not yet be sure which types of renovation solutions to order, but they know the technical terms, and basically they know how to discuss renovation solutions. They know how to discuss with the market, basically. So the goal is to have a more educated homeowner. However, if it's aimed at specialists, they can skip the first level, and we have level 2. These are renovation strategies by building type and by owner preferences. So these are specific renovation junctions and drawings, and or like they first begin with this with a elementary level of saying that okay, we add insulation to the roof, we add it to the wall, and then do you have any lock-in effects? Let's say that the roof covering is already renovated, you can't really remove it anymore, so you need to add the insulation from indoors, or whether it's even that might not be possible. How to establish what are your limitations, what is your renovation motivation, or let's say motivation, and which solutions are most appropriate. So this would give you an educated client. They already know how to speak. They already know where to place insulation, whether it's external or internal, which kinds of solutions they need, and they can already discuss with designers. So this is like an example of a design documentation that would also be included with these example drawings, where we try to maintain the original proportions as much as possible, and any limitations that the homeowner might have. For example, this is a frame structure with sawdust insulation between the framing, and let's say that the homeowner doesn't want to take it apart from the interior side. They only want to insulate the outdoors, despite the fact that there is a potential of removing this old insulation and replacing it with more efficient insulation. But okay, let's say this is the solution the homeowner wants to have. This is a potential solution of how to do it. And level 3, renovation tactics. Example construction documentation for common structures and junctions among common building types. Now this says exactly in which order to place any materials, how to provide air tightness, how to install the different measures, and this is more aimed at the self-builder, or let's say to give the homeowner a potential of being able to act as a construction supervisor, to understand what the builders are doing, even if they themselves are not doing it. And in the end, all of this hopefully might end up as part of the Building Renovation Passport, which is a concept recommended by the European Commission, where existing energy performance certificates are developed into this sort of logbook and roadmap, potentially online module where building data is stored in the logbook, and then this provides as a basis for establishing the renovation roadmap with exact renovation stages. What is the priority of each work? What is the size of the investment? Which solutions to use in which stages, etc. And this is slowly in development, but this is the future where renovation advice hopefully will end up in Estonia. Thank you. Any questions? Sure.
That was amazing, and there's a lot there. I think that database, I don't know of another. You guys are so amazing that you maybe all have them, but I think that's something would be very interesting. But the one thing of it that I noticed leads back to the real red flag, which is the rainwater goods. That is a terrifying statistic, because the single best and most important thing anyone can do with a building is make sure the rainwater is handled properly, especially because we're talking climate change. That's got to be the priority. So one of the things that really worries me, for instance, with work on the building facade is where you lose the water shedding detailing. And a lot of what people think of as decoration isn't. So what can we do? Because do you record in that database the rainwater goods?
You mean like the rainwater system that drives the building? Yeah, somewhat. As you can see, the basic of having like gutters was a very, very low. Because
if they've got very wide eaves, then I might get away with it.
Luckily in Estonia we have a tradition of building wide eaves, sure, but I entirely agree, because all of that will lead to a very moist foundation area, which leads to frost heave, which leads to capillary rise, which leads to rot in the lower log walls if the moisture barrier has been decayed or even not been installed. I agree. It is all we can do is raise awareness, I'm afraid.
Of all things that people could do, that's the first thing. They shouldn't be going anywhere near energy until they fix that. For themselves.
I think we have established there's a lot that we need to be doing before anything and it ought to be done with energy.
I would also like to ask a question regarding your suggestions. So if I understood correctly, you're for the buildings you are leaving existing outer wall where it is and adding insulation from outside. So you're actually stepping over the border with some 15 or 20 centimeters of. So you're like fattening the building, you know. And I don't know. It's a question because in Latvia there are some red lines and regulations which you cannot step over, especially in cities. So it's and also there's a land border. And it usually goes with the building. How you expect people to deal with that if they'll be renovating and stepping actually into either neighboring property if a building is on the border or against the city, which owns usually a street.
I must admit that my expertise is more related to low density areas, these sort of rural dwellings where these issues aren't that common. I know that Ullar, who's recording, might have a better answer for that. I hope maybe later you can discuss it. But yeah, I must afraid that I don't have a good answer for it right now. But yeah, in terms of like other like. I must say that in terms of like the rainfall, fattening the facade means that if you're not widening the eave, you bring the facade closer to the watershed, basically. So if you're bringing the facade outward, you need to also like extend the eave, which again restates the point of having a comprehensive view of renovation. You can't view it by wall or by roof or by window. You need to have a comprehensive view with an understanding. If you, for example, if you are renovating your roof, you need to if you might not have the funds of insulating the wall right now, you should already think about your eaves. You should leave them longer already. That they might be left like that for like 10 years, perhaps. Architecturally, it might not look that logical, but that leaves you the opportunity to insulate the roofs in a way that the proportion of the building will be preserved in the end. So it's this long-term view that the homeowners will need to have when preserving the proportions of the building.
Thank you very much for this thorough investigations and service that you have done on detached houses. It's really interesting. I will look into some parts. I think the presentation you had last with the different stages, it's really helpful. So I would like to look into that further. But my question is for you, because you had in the middle of your presentation, you had a picture of two buildings, and then you said this was easy to renovate and that was difficult to renovate. And
I will get back to it.
And we did a study, there it is, about changes in detached houses, and I will use detached houses now. And we saw that the modern buildings, it was actually more difficult to renovate them without losing their original character than the buildings from the 1910, 20 and so on. When you come into this functionalistic architecture, it is much easier to destroy the character of the building than the older one that has they can be changed much more before you see it. So I thought that was really interesting, and I just wanted to ask you if you have thought about that in your study.
I understand. Yeah, I see what you mean. I think it all goes down to building type and architectural style. I believe that, sure, like 30s and the functionalist architecture, where like the question of proportion is the balance of proportion is much more subtle and much more easier to ruin. However, buildings like this, I believe that this example is something a bit different than what you might be describing, because this is a mass-produced dwelling. And in that sense, renovating this building is somewhat more closer to renovating a concrete block apartment building in Estonia. You can copy paste the solutions much easier than compared to this kind of dwelling that needs a lot more tailored approaches. So I believe that what you might be describing is placed somewhat in the middle, perhaps then, but yeah, this building, when you compare it before and after, it's essentially the same. You have this like small weird nooks that you get where the placement of the insulation was perhaps not completely thought through, but I'm pretty sure everyone would agree who knows what type of building this is, that the character is completely preserved here, 100%.
What's going to happen to it in 20 years?
Which one? This one. We can hope that the existing renovation solutions don't need renovation before the homeowner gets to the unrenovated structures right now, because that is the worst situation, where you do it in stages. You don't really perhaps know what you're doing. The material is not that good. The finishing is not the best in terms of warding off decay, and you discover that when you're starting to renovate, let's say you did your walls, and then 20 years you do your roof, you notice that the wall needs replacing also.
Or that you've lost you've got such damage
Yeah.
that it becomes very hard.
Yeah, again, going back to that, or the renovation solutions are so haphazard, the repair has not been done, maintenance has been neglected. The list of works is just so great, there's nothing left in the building even.
And if they're never renovating their rainwater goods.
Well, I will say that rainwater goods are not that traditional, perhaps, in Estonian rural architecture, so if it has survived for centuries, I don't know.
I didn't have the insulation. That's what worries me. It's going to trap the water.
Yeah, I just want to return to you for your remark about the about the plaster on the buildings in Akko, that you mentioned the ripping off of interior in order to expose the logs. And I think this reminds indeed what today is considered as beautiful, the facades of stone, and you see the material and it's old, and but and it's sometimes architects come when they come to work on buildings in Akko and they say, yeah, but that's what the client wants. He wants this authentic thing, and it's very difficult to convince them that
Authentic
plastering and that it's not a matter of beautiful or authentic, or it's a matter of building physics.
Yes.
And then finally also climate. But that's very hard to convince, and today it's a matter of fashion.
Yeah.
I think always there were fashions, but not to extent of how you build your house and that it stands the weather and physics.
Good. You also wants to add something.
I can continue this point just to drive one more message home with leaving the plaster or taking the plaster off or replastering a stone building or any building for that matter. Originally, the idea was that this does get affected by climate over time, but it protects the stone. So there is an assumption that there is maintenance in the process, because after a while it will deteriorate and then you have to replaster it again. And this is maybe the biggest, in some ways, the biggest consideration in all of these. I don't know if it's relevant to these buildings, but there is an expectation that once we renovate, we won't need to do it anymore ever.
The illusion of a maintenance-free building is very prevalent.
Yes, so
It's not the point that once you apply the plaster or once you install the facade boarding, once you paint it, I expect it to last 100 years. You're supposed to freshen it. You're supposed to protect it, because that is what's protecting the main load-bearing structure. The rendering, the wood facade, the paint, its point is, in a way, is to decay, so that the inner structures don't decay. It's a sort of sacrificial part of the structure.
And it's common to the whole world.
Yes.
We have one more question, or no? No. Then the last words. Alois, thank you very much.
Okay, but thank you for coming. Thank you for lasting what I'm sure was a long day. It's already
2 days, long
2 days. I hope this has been an enlightening conference for you and an enlightening visit to the Estonian Open Air Museum. I hope you come again. And
Thank you.
thank you. Until next time.
Thank you.
Sorry?
What is it in Estonian?
Aitäh.
Aitäh.